is not a statement. It is a query. All right. Un peu de potion magique? Non. Oui. Oui. Oh, champagne just after noon. That's why I always brief after 12, yeah. All right. Yeah, you know who's ring that tone that is. The boss. What? No, I'm here. All right. Good afternoon to all of you. As you saw this morning, the Security Council held a meeting on the situation in Venezuela, and the members of the council heard from the Secretary General. In the remarks that were delivered on his behalf by Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, the Secretary General said he is deeply concerned about the possible intensification of instability in Venezuela and the potential impact on the region, and the precedent the U.S. military operation may set for how relations between and among states are conducted. The Secretary General said he remains deeply concerned that the rules of international law have not been respected with regard to the military intervention on January 3rd. He highlighted that the Charter of the UN enshrines a prohibition of the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any member state. The Secretary General said it is possible to prevent a wider and more destructive conflagration. He called on all Venezuelan actors to engage in an inclusive, democratic dialogue in which all sectors of society can determine their future. He further urged Venezuela's neighbors and the international community more broadly to act in a spirit of solidarity in adherence to the principles, laws, and rules erected to promote peaceful coexistence. In his remarks, which were shared with you, and his remarks have been shared with you, and you saw that obviously over the weekend we did issue a statement on Venezuela that emphasized the importance and full respect by all of international law, including the Charter of the United Nations. Also, just on the humanitarian front in Venezuela, our colleagues from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that the situation in Venezuela remains dire. At the start of this year, some 7.9 million people in Venezuela were found to need urgent support. This is the equivalent of more than a quarter of the country's population. We, along with our humanitarian partners under the leadership of the resident humanitarian coordinator in Venezuela, are assessing the situation, focusing on providing support as needed. We continue to provide assistance to the most vulnerable, including food, healthcare, and protection services. The UN emphasizes the importance of respect of international law and the need to protect civilians and preserving humanitarian operational continuity so that assistance can be delivered in line with humanitarian principles. Funding is obviously also critical. The humanitarian response plan for Venezuela remains critically underfunded. Last year, only 17% of more than $600 million needed was received, making it one of the least funded country appeals in the world. More support is urgently needed to keep life-saving aid reaching the most vulnerable. Quick update for you from our Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, who arrived in Beirut, Lebanon today. Tomorrow he will travel south to Naqoura, where he will meet with UNIFIL leadership and peacekeepers and visit several of the missions positioned along the Blue Line. On Wednesday, he will return to Beirut for meetings with Lebanese authorities, including the President, Joseph Aoun, senior ministers, and the commander of the Lebanese Armed Forces, General Rodolphe Haikal. All of this to discuss the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. He will then travel on to the Golan to visit members of the UN Disengagement Observer Force on the Golan and to Damascus to meet with Syrian authorities. From there, his mission will take him to Jordan and then to Israel, including to visit the headquarters of the UN Truce Supervision Organization, UNSO, before concluding his travels to the region in Saudi Arabia. These visits are an opportunity for Mr. Lacroix to express our solidarity and support for UN peacekeepers, troop contributing countries, mission partners, and the communities they serve as peacekeeping missions continue to face financial and operational challenges while implementing their mandates in an increasingly complex environment, to say the least. We will share additional details of his travels as they take place. And turning to the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, and especially in Gaza, our colleagues at OCHA tell us that aid workers continue to respond to people's immense needs in Gaza despite the persistent impediments hindering a full scale-up of humanitarian operations. Last week alone, we and our humanitarian partners brought more than 10,000 metric tons of aid through the Karim Shalom, Karim Abu Salam crossing and the Zikim crossing. That covers Monday to Sunday based on the data collected by the mechanism created by Resolution 2720, which, as you will recall, doesn't include bilateral donations or the commercial sectors coming into Gaza. Supplies that we were able to monitor include food and cooking ingredients, animal fodder, soap, and other hygiene items, including diapers and winter clothing, blankets, and mattresses. Inside Gaza, we and our partners have started January's round of general food assistance for families. Each family receives 2 food parcels and 2 25-kilogram bags of flours. Since the ceasefire, and by the end of 2025, rations covered between 50 and 75% of the daily, of the minimum caloric needs. The January round is the first since October 2023 in which partners had sufficient stock to meet 100% of the minimum caloric standard. To further address food insecurity, we are supporting the production of about 170,000 bread bundles every day, each weighing about 2 kilograms. These are distributed free of charge in more than 400 shelters and at subsidized prices in about 150 shops. At the same time, hot meals kitchens continue to operate, supported by our colleagues on the ground, and they now serve 1.5 million meals every single day. Also, I would encourage you to look on the OCHA website today, as they've just published a recap of progress made during the second month of the ceasefire. Turning to the situation in Sudan, and I can tell you that we remain deeply concerned by the continuing suffering of civilians amid escalating violence, particularly in the Darfur and Kordofan regions of that country. In North Darfur states, drone strikes on January 3rd reportedly caused civilian casualties in the villages of Al-Zork and Goher, including strikes on a market and a medical clinic. The same day in West Darfur State, 1 civilian was reportedly killed following 2 drone attacks in the Kulbus locality. Our humanitarian partners say the strikes in Kulbus displaced more than 600 people. In South Kordofan State, multiple drone attacks between January 1st and 3rd in Dilling reportedly resulted in civilian deaths and injuries. The situation in the city remains dire, with civilians trapped under siege and humanitarian conditions continuing to deteriorate as access to essential supplies is increasingly restricted. We reiterate our call for the protection of civilians and for the unhindered humanitarian access to all affected areas. Continued and predictable humanitarian access to deliver life-saving assistance and to prevent further deterioration of the humanitarian situation is essential. Over the weekend, we also issued a statement. Going back to my notes a little. Over the weekend, and this is concerning Gaza and Israel, over the weekend we issued a statement expressing the Secretary General's deep concern at the Israeli authorities' announcement to suspend the operations of several international non-governmental organizations in the occupied Palestinian territory. The Secretary General in the statement called for this measure to be reversed, stressing that international non-governmental organizations are indispensable to life-saving humanitarian work and that the suspension risks undermining the fragile progress made during the ceasefire. The Secretary General underscores that pursuant to its obligations under international humanitarian law, Israel must allow and facilitate rapid and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief for all civilians in need. The full statement was shared with you. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues there say that attacks and hostilities over the weekend reportedly caused dozens of civilian casualties, including children, and left many others without electricity amid below-zero temperatures. In Kharkiv City, an attack killed at least 6 civilians, injured dozens of others, and also damaged residential buildings and healthcare facilities, leaving parts of the city without electricity, without water, and without gas. In the capital, Kyiv, and its region, overnight attacks today, on January 5th, also killed and injured civilians. Many residential buildings in the region were also damaged, and several thousand households remain without electricity. Aid workers provided support in Kharkiv as well as in Kyiv, assisting those who need it. In Chernihiv, in Donetsk, Kherson, and Mykolaiv regions, attacks were also reported and caused civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure, resulting also in power outage in those regions. Nationwide, scheduled power outages continue due to cumulative damage to energy infrastructure. That's what the grid operator in Ukraine is telling us. Our humanitarian colleagues also note that on January 2nd, authorities announced mandatory evacuations of more than 3,000 children and their families from frontline areas in Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia region. Evacuations are continuing in Donetsk amid concerns over children remaining in frontline towns. And lastly, given that we had no briefings, I did want to mention that we had 2 more member states pay their regular budget dues in the nick of time, shall we say, before the end of the calendar year. And we want to thank our friends in Belize and in Syria, who both paid their regular budget dues for 2025. We had 151 paid up last year. The letters asking for money for this year will go out shortly, and we will, of course, flag those. Gabriel.
Thank you, Steph. Did the UN recognize Nicolas Maduro as legitimate president of Venezuela?
Look, Secretary General, we're not in the business of recognizing governments. This is a member state organization. The credentials of the Venezuelan delegation here, as far as I know, we're not questioned. I think if you look back in the aftermath and prior to the last election in Venezuela, I think the Secretary General was very clear in his concerns on how the election was run, the lack of transparency, as well as I would also refer you to statements of the independent experts he appointed. As he said in the statement over the weekend, I mean, regardless of the situation in Venezuela, he has a very deep concern that international law was not respected during the U.S. operation.
Were the actions of the United States a violation of the UN Charter?
As I said, he is very concerned that as he said in his statement, that what happened in Venezuela over the weekend was not in respect of international law or the Charter.
And has he spoken to Delcy Rodriguez, the Vice President?
He has not. The Secretary General had he's on a plane on his way back. He had an official program in Lisbon today with the government that was canceled, and he should be in the building shortly. Deji.
Why in the statement the Secretary General did not condemn but expressed deeply concerned about the situation, what happened on the 3rd of January?
Listen, I will leave the analysis to you. I think he made his position very clear in the statement. He made his position that we issued over the weekend. He's made his position very clear in the statement that Rosemary DiCarlo read out on his behalf over the weekend. And he has been very consistent in calling for the respect of the Charter, respect for the principles of sovereignty, political independence, territorial integrity of states, and the prohibition of the threat of use of force. And as he said today, the power of law must prevail.
Steph, many people ask me to ask you this question. In light of such an operation, how is the UN still relevant?
How is what?
The UN is still relevant. You cannot stop it. You cannot condemn it. You just say respect of law, respect of UN Charter. But
well, which UN are you speaking about?
But
No, but I'm asking you, are you speaking about the Security Council and its ability to ensure that there is respect for international law? Are you talking about our UN humanitarian workers in Venezuela who continue to support the people of
Secretariat,
Venezuela?
for example?
Are you talking about the human rights framework? I think, listen, questions are all legitimate, but I think you need to ask whoever's asking you those questions, which UN they're speaking about. And I think what you heard from many council members today was a reaffirmation of the need for member states to respect the charter that they themselves signed on to, right? The treaties that they themselves agreed to. The Secretary General doesn't have a nightstick with which he can beat member states over the head, right? Member states are expected to live up to the principles that they themselves have agreed to. Mr. Klein, and then we'll go to Mr. David.
Thank you. Security Council Resolution 1373, which was passed under Chapter 7, used the word decides, that all states shall ensure that, quote, any person who participates in the financing of terrorist acts is brought to justice. A UN panel report, or UN committee report, that was cited by U.S. Ambassador Waltz during the Security Council meeting found that the Maduro regime has been heavily involved in drug trafficking, and there is documented evidence of Hezbollah money laundering from the Maduro regime to help finance its terrorist activities. So what I'm wondering here is, in the statement that your office issued over the weekend, there was no mention at all of the Maduro regime's participation in the financing of terrorist activities and its drug trafficking. The statement that Rosemary DiCarlo read out this morning, just at the end, says international law contains tools to address issues such as illicit traffic in narcotics. My question is, what are those tools? How have they been implemented? And have they been effective?
Those tools are the various international treaties that exist on international transnational crime, on illicit drugs. I think the Secretary General's concern, not only in this case, in many cases, is unilateral action taken by one member state.
But what I want to know is, because there may be a vacuum here in terms of enforcement, under international law, the actual effective use of these tools,
well,
to stop the Venezuelan regime's drug trafficking and financing of terrorism.
From our standpoint, international and the tools of international law work best when they are used by the international community in international cooperation. David.
Good morning, Steph. Thank you. In the administration's various speeches, we are now in the Donroe Doctrine era.
The what?
The Donroe Doctrine, as you may have heard. How concerned is the UN, the Secretary General, about other potential unilateral actions in this hemisphere, from Greenland to Cuba to Colombia, as the President and the U.S. Secretary of State have stated? Is there a planned discussion with the Secretary General and this administration on anything related to U.S. Movement forward in this hemisphere? How much is the UN concerned about, what has obviously taken place and what is potentially down the pike?
I mean, listen, as I said, Secretary General is on his way. He'll meet with the senior advisors this afternoon, and we'll keep you posted on further contacts. There is a concern, and I think Secretary General expressed it in his remarks, of the potential destabilization of the region and beyond. And I think he has been very consistent in commenting on the various things we've seen the last few years that, in his mind, were not in line with international law and with the charter that all of these 193 member states have signed into. What we want to see is not the power of might. What we want to see is the power of law. Yes, Madame, and then we'll go.
Thank you. Mr. Stéphane, I would like to know if the Secretary General has been taking a position on national-wide protest in Iran and the violent response of the government, and does he have any plan to publicly address that? Thank you.
Yes, so I can tell you that the Secretary General is following with concern the ongoing protest in the Islamic Republic of Iran. He's deeply saddened by the reported loss of life and injuries resulting from clashes between security forces and protesters. He underscores the need to prevent any further casualties. He also calls on the authorities to uphold the right of freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. All individuals must be allowed to protest peacefully and express their grievances. The Secretary General further emphasizes the importance of all actors in Iran and the wider region refraining from actions that could heighten tensions and contribute to instability. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you. John Haltwanger from Foreign Policy. You were asked about the UN's continued relevance and noted its humanitarian work, et cetera. But is it fair to say that the UN might be facing an identity crisis of sorts when we have permanent veto-wielding members of the UN Security Council taking actions that raise concerns about violation of international law, and then other veto-wielding members like Russia, which invaded Ukraine, accusing these countries of hypocrisy? It seems like these countries are talking in circles while nothing is actually changing on the ground. Is it fair to ask and to wonder if the UN is facing an identity crisis in terms of its ability to shape global events and to uphold global security?
Look, there is no identity crisis for the Secretary General, right? Our identity is rooted in the Charter, in international law, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There is a legitimate question of asking member states how they respect and uphold the laws and the charters they themselves have put into play. There is a legitimate question which the Secretary General himself has raised, which is that international law and the charter is not an a la carte menu, right? It's a prefix. It's the whole thing. Member states created this organization to save future generations from the scourge of war. We need member states to uphold this organization and its values for the sake of future generations. Yes, sir. Sorry, we'll get...
Thank you, Steph. Back a follow-up on our colleague David from Fox News question about the Monroe Doctrine. Early December...
It predates the creation of the United Nations.
I understand. Early December 2025, the United States have issued, under the Trump administration, the National Security Strategy, which stipulated clearly, or invoked clearly, the Monroe Doctrine. And since there are still many nations around the world look up to the United Nations and to the weight of the Secretary General's statements and comments on current issues, what is precisely the Secretary General view the new national security strategy of the Trump administration, as well as the invocation of the Monroe Doctrine in the 21st century? Thank you.
We're not going to get into a detailed commentary analysis of the national security strategy of the United States or any other member state, right? I can repeat using different combination of words to the questions I've been asked. For us, it's about the Charter. For us, it's about international law. It's about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These things need to be respected. And every country has a right to establish its own national security policy and its own national security aims. What we ask is that they be done in full respect of international law. Madame.
Happy New Year, Steve. I have a follow-up on Iran. Last week you received a letter from the Islamic Republic of Iran mission regarding the comments and the threats that the President of United States issued, if he stated that if the Iranian regime keep the crackdown on people, he is going to attack Iran again, basically. Did the Secretary General respond to that letter, and also did he speak from anyone from the Iranian government? Is he in touch regarding the ongoing crackdown?
I don't have any information to share with you at this point on contacts. The letter was received. It was distributed as a document, as the Permanent Mission of the Islamic Republic of Iran asked us to do. I think for the Secretary General, it's very clear that countries in the region and further afield should refrain from any actions, whether kinetic or verbal, that could heighten tensions and contribute to furthering the regional instability. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have three questions related to Bangladesh. As you know, the national parliamentary election in Bangladesh is scheduled February 12. Will the United Nations send any observer to this election?
No, so we do not, the UN itself doesn't send observers unless there is a mandate from the General Assembly or the Security Council, so that's no longer something that we do. I can check for you whether the UN country office is offering any technical support, which is something that we often do in terms of the elections.
Second, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP's acting chairman, Tareq Rahman, has returned his own country after 17 years, you know. So how do you assess his return in the context of the transition to democracy in Bangladesh?
I'm not an assessor of news. Journalists assess news. So the secretary, we will support in any way we can elections and the free expression by the Bangladeshi people of their political vision for their country.
And third and lastly, what is the reaction to the death of Begum Khaleda Zia, who was the first female prime minister in Bangladesh and served as prime minister for 3 times? Thank you.
We obviously send condolences to her family and to the people of Bangladesh on her passing. Abdelhamid, you've been very patient, and then we'll make our way.
Thank you, Steph. And I hope you will be patient with my question.
How have I never not been patient with you? Okay, maybe a few times, but go ahead.
You just said that the SG doesn't have a stick to beat those heads of a state on their head or something like that. Yes, but he has morality. He has an office which has so much moral authority. And if he doesn't live up to that morality, then there is something we have to ask. I mean, if there is an invasion of a country, kidnapping of a president, right or wrong, that's not our business. And he doesn't condemn it, right?
I think,
straightforward.
Listen, again, Abdelhamid.
Can I just compare it with Ukraine? I mean, he was so forceful, he was so direct, he condemned Russia. He said this is violation of the charter. He said he was very powerful.
I think the secretary was very clear over the weekend and today, but you and I disagree. Do you have another question? I'm happy to entertain it.
Yes. I mean, if we accept this model of invasion of a country based on narcotics or trade, how many countries must be invaded? I think Afghanistan, maybe 20 countries should invade Afghanistan and others like Colombia or other who produce these narcotics and trade them. So should we accept this logic?
We should. The only logic we should accept is respect for the charter, respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states.
And last, Israel today attacked Lebanon in 2 places and killed 4 people in Gaza. I haven't seen about these Palestinian casualties.
I haven't gotten an update from our peacekeeping mission, but as soon as we do, I will share that with you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please.
Yes, thank you. I'm Tenang from Vietnam Television. I have a question about the Venezuela situation. So is there any concern that the divisions within the Security Council could weaken the role of multilateral mechanisms in addressing the crisis in Venezuela? Thank you.
Well, I mean, the divisions in the Security Council that we have seen very clearly for some time weaken the Security Council and weaken the role of the Security Council as the primary body responsible for peace and security within the international system. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Steph. On Israel and Gaza, recent reports indicate that within the last 24 hours, Israel has further expanded the agreed upon yellow line past its intended demarcated borders further into eastern Gaza. Again, while the SG and yourself have made very clear that the UN is not an arbiter towards the agreed upon ceasefire deal, which has been continually violated, is the SG alarmed by the latest developments?
I haven't. Those reports haven't been shared with me, but obviously the last thing we would want to see is that so-called yellow line become permanent or grow in size.
And then just to follow up, has there, again, I know you haven't heard about it, but as soon as you get a response from UN personnel on the ground, would you mind sharing that?
I would not mind at all.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
Thanks. Happy New Year. Following on the question about whether the Secretary General has spoken to Delcy Rodriguez, which he has not, has Ms. DiCarlo or anyone else at that level or above in the UN? And if so, what was said?
No, not at this point, and nothing to share with you. But as soon as there's contacts, I will. Dennis, then Stefano.
Couple of quick questions. So you told that Secretary General is going back from Lisbon
Today,
and
yep.
his program was cancelled. Was it cancelled because of Venezuela?
Yes.
The second one, does Secretary General intend to contact Nicolas Maduro as far as the United Nations headquarters in New York and Nicolas Maduro?
I'm not aware of any plan for him to try to contact Mr. Maduro.
The third one, so there are reports that there are dozens of killed in Venezuela. So does Secretary General condemn killings of dozens of people during the U.S. operation in
Caracas? I mean, we are trying to get more information about what's happened on the ground, and I think our statement concerning the military operation was very clear. Stefano Vacara, buon anno.
Buon anno anche a te. Thank you, Stéphane. Is maybe a follow-up because I arrived a little bit late, but it's about Colombia. I mean, President Trump basically said more than once that the next one that could happen, the same thing, is Colombia and the president of Colombia. So, is the Secretary General trying to prevent something like this to happen? I know there's been now reaction to the fact, but there is some strategy, some action that the Secretary General would like to do, maybe talk to both presidents to prevent that something like this happen tomorrow, next week in Colombia?
I think, as I said, we will update you on potential contacts. We're obviously very concerned at the risk of destabilization spreading beyond what we saw in Venezuela. And again, I think going back to the Charter, which is very clear, calling on member states to respect the territorial integrity of other states. Mr. Klein, let's go back to you, and then Gabriel.
This should be a somewhat shorter question this time.
Probably with a long answer.
Actually, it's two questions, but they're both short. First one, has the Secretary General tried to reach out to either President Trump himself or Secretary of State Rubio to discuss the Venezuelan operation?
As I said, he's on a plane right now. I'll be able to share, hopefully, more contacts with you in the hours ahead or tomorrow.
Okay. My second question, you cited many times the UN Charter, which also contains a provision that the U.S. is relying on, the right of self-defense, which is not defined explicitly in the Charter, but the U.S. position is that the what it calls the narco-terrorism that has introduced lethal drugs into the United States, killed Americans, and also financed Venezuelan gangs that have killed Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm well aware of that.
Does the Secretary General reject that?
I'm
defense?
well aware of that provision in the charter, which is clear. But I can tell you that we have not received any official communication from the United States regarding the justification for what happened. And in the past, we have, but as of an hour ago, we had not.
But with the Secretary General, I mean, just since it's been cited, does he reject that defense in this circumstance?
Joe, in all fairness, many reasons have been cited. We have not received anything officially. Gabriel, and then we'll go to Penn.
Two quick ones, Steph. In his remarks to the Security Council this morning, Jeffrey Sachs said that the Secretary General should appoint a special envoy to Venezuela to engage with stakeholders there. Is that something the Secretary General is considering?
As I said, as soon as I have something to share with you on those things, I will.
And as you noted, the UN considered Maduro the legitimate president of Venezuela. Did.
Sorry?
As you noted at the beginning.
No,
of
I didn't. I said we were not in the business of recognizing individuals. I said the credentials of the Venezuelan delegation, as far as I know here, have not been challenged.
Fair point. I stand corrected. My question, however, is how does the Secretary General, the words that the Secretary General uses are very important, as you well know. You're asked about them many times during the week here. How does the Secretary General define what happened to Nicolas Maduro on the morning of Saturday?
It was a military operation, military action that we saw, and Mr. Maduro was taken from Venezuela and brought here.
Was he kidnapped?
I think I answered the question to the best of my ability, Counselor. Pan.
Thank you, Steph. Happy New Year.
And to you.
It seems that the Secretary General has deliberately chosen not to use the word condemn regarding the U.S. military action on Venezuela. I remember that when Russia launched its military operation against Ukraine, he used the word multiple times. So what's the consideration that he chose not to use the word?
Look,
Thank you.
I think the Secretary General used the words that he used for this particular situation. While situations may differ, I think the consistency of the Secretary General's message in the calling on all member states to uphold international law has been very clear. On that note, I bid you adieu. See you whenever. Inshallah. Yeah.